Go, we live. Hey!
Good morning. Welcome to Sondag Skool Sunday. Guess where we are?
Guess who's back, man?
Hello. We are all the way live from
Oudtshoorn.
Oudtshoorn.
Shout out to Oudtshoorn mensen, to all my Oudtshoorn peeps. Hello to all Oudtshoorn's peeps. Dames Oudtshoorn peeps. Hello.
Yeah, it's nice to be here in a bit of a hometown in my heart. So, welcome Oudtshoorn.
Oudtshoorn's so good for our souls right now.
Yeah.
It's been a lockdown mess, but nah, there's nothing like the soil and the sand and the fresh air and the quietness to bring you back home.
Silence,
Girl.
Oh my God, we sat here on Diane Eubert's beautiful foreporch.
Shout out to Diane for hosting us.
Beautiful garden, and it was just so quiet. I forgot how quiet Oudtshoorn can actually be. It was beautiful.
Okay, but before we forget back,
yes, who do we have today?
Guys, this person we have today needs no introduction. She's ook online. So moet kyk jy, ons gaan nou vir haar laat ingaan. You know, guys, this week we are chatting to one of my absolute faves, Vania Cloete-Collison.
The Vania.
This is called Vania Cloete-Collison for Good Up FM News. Anyway, so before we let Vania in, we just want to tell you guys we're excited for Vania. And we're going to let her in and then we're going to introduce her so that she can feel uncomfortable because she's most that girl. Vania, we're going to add you now. Sorry, the tick.
Everybody that's joined us, that's waving us, we're waving back. Welcome. It's going to be a fun show.
Welcome to Sherelle Hubert. Welcome to Tash.
Hello.
Hello, Vania.
How's it, guys? I don't know what's going on. Let me just intervene. Everything has just gone soft. There we go. Yes.
Why Vania looks. I doubt it was like, no, we don't have to makeup. I was like, nobody talking to Vania Cloete-Collison. Now we look like us.
Listen here, I tried hard to look presentable for you guys because I know, Deirdre, you have just become the best style queen. Let's just face that. Dalmary, you know, we have to keep up with that sister of yours. And this is covering my double chin. That was created in lockdown.
Welcome to Mark Cloete. Shout out to Vania's baby sister, to Mark Cloete. Hello, we see you. So anyway, so before we start, let us introduce Vania. Yes. Guys, how do I know Vania? Kayer days. So Vania and I met a few years ago, and many moons ago, actually not even a few years, I know it was many moons ago. I remember when Vania stepped into the editorial office, I saw Vania and I was like, these colored goose, but ek wil this. Like Vania just commands the energy. She was just the cool older sister that you just wanted to be like. And Julie Beth is watching. She can be, me and Julie Beth used to sing your praises. You're going to be like Vania. So Vania, tell us about yourself. What do you do? Where you from? We know you from the radio, but there's so much more to you.
Deirdre, thank you for that wonderful words. It's endearing. And you know what? I can say likewise. It was such a joy to have met you at that time. And I'm just so blessed that we are still in each other's lives. Vania, I would say, first and foremost, I am a very proud mother of two beautiful babies. Yeah, gorgeous, 4 years old and 3 years old. So it's been a rough journey because, as you can hear, they're 1 year apart and life as I know it or knew it is totally gone. But for the better, because they've come to completely enrich my life. I share those beautiful kids with my adolescent sweetheart. We've been married for 11 years now and still going strong. And yeah, I've been in the media industry for 20 years, both broadcasting and print. But I am actually a very passionate, self-taught chef. And at this stage in my life, I want to turn everything into my life as a beautiful plate of food. You know, food is for the soul, and everything I take on lifestyle-wise, because that is where my passions lie, in food, decor, just the creative space. But definitely if I'm a single one space out, then it is food, and I'm running with it on every level, from health to wealth, to lekkertye, just, you know, a mengelmoes.
So for those of you who don't know, Vania has this hashtag called #making the pots of VCC. And Vania started making food in jars that was just so lekker. Like, guys, let me just tell you guys, and Julibeth once again will be armed early on when I said how cool Vania is. But explained to us her ideas for what she would make to eat. And she would make you hungry. You will just listen to her talk about food and she will make you hungry. And to see that those captions that you created come to life in a way that is just beauty on a plate. Like, you know, tell us about your business, Vania, because not a lot of people know that you make the most beautiful food.
So, okay, pre-lockdown, I started the business about 2 years ago. In August of this year, it will be 2 years that I started this, let's call it passion project, which is now definitely showing itself up to be much more than that. I felt the need to better myself. I have an autoimmune disease called psoriasis. And it was my whole life I've had it on my scalp, and then it started showing up on my face. Now, actually, in latter day, and especially in lockdown, it really came to the fore in my face. But let's rewind back to 2 years ago. And I mean, we love to eat. We love good food all the time. And I mean, we are social beings. We are always caring with good food. We never do anything that excludes good food, right? And then I thought to myself, I'm so creative in the kitchen, but why does it have to be unhealthy? Why can't I move into this space of a healthier genre of really delicious foods? So I created this hashtag, making the pots with Vania, and well, VCC, and I've just decided, goodness, why must I have such a long name? So I shortened it to just Vania. And at the end of the day, I had this beautiful client base that I prepared meals in a jar for, and it was freshly made salads and home cooked meals, and everything I did was gluten and sugar free, refined sugar free, and I would create my own sauces, my own condiments, my own everything that could be made from scratch. I tried to do and offer that to my wonderful clients who I am missing dearly, because lockdown has come, and you know, it takes a toll, or it took a toll on all of us in one form or another. And at one stage, you know, if the papers weren't in order, you couldn't cook for the public because, you know, you were at home type thing. And I started in lockdown. Then I decided one day, no, let me just get up, and I can't wilt away. I've put in too much work in this, and I miss it. For that matter. And 2020 was supposed to be my year, you know, of taking this thing completely forward. And so now, as you know, I'm just making really delicious comfort food, homemade food. And I have a beautiful base that, if I don't cook this week, asks me when's the next offering coming. And that in itself is really heartwarming. I love that. It means that whatever I'm doing right, and people want it. So I need to get off my behind and continue.
That's the beauty of it is, and I always say to Dominic, you know, when we closed up Hellacotted Life's merch store, it was heartwarming for us to hear how people ask us where we're going. And
yes.
Those are the things that really keeps our energy, you know, up, that encouragement of like, you know what, okay, people are seeing us, and like, you know, we are loved, and you know, what we put out there, and the products we put out there. So
exactly. Sorry, it was breaking up. I didn't hear that last part.
Oh, sorry. I was saying you totally relate to that whole notion of just like, you know,
yes,
looking for you. Yeah. So we just.
But also, you know what? Just to add to that, so I've decided now that these home cooked meals, these comfort foods are, yes, it's good for the soul, and it was good for me to almost band-aid the issue, you know, or the need to still be out there and to continue with making the pots. But it really is time to go back to where I came from, which is ultimately health, the purpose of the brand. And so watch the space.
Yes, ma'am. Still watching. Vania, what you're saying that where you coming from, how was it for you growing up as a colored female or colored girl growing up?
I have fond memories of my childhood, really. I come from a very big family. First and foremost, my cousins and my siblings were my best friends, and we had the same issues. And majority of those issues in the younger days were having strict parents. So we would complain to each other because we saw each other on the regular. We had fun together. It was great. But if I must single out something, growing up was a bit emotional, shall I say, because of our parents, and my parents hail from the Northern Cape. So relocating to Cape Town and having all of these fears, you know, raising children in the world that we live in, those fears were almost like it was on your shoulders. There was that constant reminder that the world is not safe. So you were never young, free, and let's take single out of the picture, but there was always that concern, that worry, and that concern lives on today. But it was almost a bit crippling, you know. I also I was raised very differently to I would say to you and Dalmarie, Deirdre, in the sense that I never lived in a residential area. So already I was segregated from a bit of that community vibe, in the sense that I didn't get the opportunity to play in the road with your friends or whatever, because we never had neighbors. I literally grew up right in the beginning when we moved to Cape Town. That was before I turned 1 year old. We lived at a children's home in Athlone, where my parents were the caretakers of many orphans. So already at a very young age, I had to share my parents, you know. But I had brothers and sisters from other backgrounds and who taught me a lot. And there was a lot of love to go around, but at the same time, a lot of hardships that you didn't experience in your own life, but you were going through it minute by minute with these people, new people who have become your family. I mean, the age groups were so vast. There were kids almost my age sharing my parents' bed with me. You know, and I was an only child for quite some time. But then there were teenagers who were dealing with, you know, those babies needed comfort first and foremost, and the older ones needed direction and needed to understand maybe their situation better. So my parents, not being psychologists, and you know, had to find themselves and make it happen in that space. Then after that, at fast track to like 9-10 years old, I found myself living on CPUT campus, and that's essentially where I grew up. Then I had all these other brothers and sisters who were much older than me, and the issues continued, because you can obviously understand with adolescence come more, and this was again out of towners, people from, you know, across our country coming to study at the university, and my parents were essentially responsible for them, and I lived in that space. So if I needed to go and visit Deirdre and Dalmarie, my dad had to drive me there, you know, and go fetch me again, whereas you just went next door or opposite the road. That happened for me much later in life, when I was very adamant to get a driver's license. No, he like in the neighborhood. No, lupusi me ronti. You know. But I would think that just that safety aspect, or as a colored female, you couldn't go anywhere, even though they went to drop you by your friends. My dad was so fearful that something would happen to us. He was so fearful that we would go wayward. You know, me as the eldest, that you would fall to a social ill, that you know, would forget their teachings. I think now that I'm a parent, I understand that concept much more, but it was difficult as a child.
I can imagine, and this is a conversation Dal and I had a while ago. So Dal for many years lived in Oudtshoorn, and it was a breeze for her to raise. Pretty much Renisha was raised here, and then CJ was born here as well. And so, you know, coming from Cape Town, she embraced the beauty of what the Karoo offers, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, coming back to Cape Town, she probably faced the same fears your mom faced, your parents faced, you know, raising kids in the city.
Yes.
Is tough. I mean, being a parent now, I can fully relate as to how your parents felt, because I've been in Cape Town for about 5 years now, and it is still tough. And I'm from, you know, I grew up in, but it's tough to come from a small community that's safe, you know. My kids were fortunate, you know, that everybody around us knew us. You know, you could play in the road. You could sometimes have the doors open here in Oudtshoorn, and then
yes,
schools are far. You don't know anybody, although you're from the city. You don't know anybody, so it's tough to raise your kids like that. It's just
yeah, agreed.
You can't. You have to. It's interesting because, like, you know, I've watched them in the past 5 years have to find that balance, you know, between. You know, you can't shelter your children. It is unfortunately the reality of the world. Like, you know, you can give them safe environments, but you cannot shelter them. So it's an interesting perspective to engage in where your parents was concerned, you know, because they, you know, like you said, they came from the Northern Cape. They worked at a place where they, you know, had to give fully of themselves, and in the same breath they had kids that, you know, they were dealing with kids that were broken in essence, and then had to shelter you know.
Correct.
As a child,
say again.
What was your coping mechanism,
like within those situations?
Within those situations as a child,
I think growing up, school was my coping mechanism. Besides now having a lot of support and attention around me, and when I say that again, that coming from a big family, we always saw each other. We were in each other's faces constantly. Like, you know, you could always go to an auntie or an uncle for advice if you didn't want to go to your parents or whatever. But school was really, I was one of those children who lived for school. I couldn't wait to go to school, because that's where all the other friends and the outside world was. And I just enjoyed school. It really was. And also, if I have to now sidebar again, think of another example. I was always a talker. I never harbored anything. So I would almost heal myself. My coping mechanism would be to just engage with my feelings, you know. So I spoke to my parents a lot. I spoke to my siblings and my cousins and friends a lot. I didn't have secrets, if you know what I mean. So as iets vir my as geplakt, then I would talk about it. And also then the wonderful world of singing. Oh my goodness, you know. If I was scared or if I was sad, music, you know, was definitely something that would uplift me. I would just go into that space and pretend that I was Mariah Carey or whomever, Roxette or even Whitney, dare I say today, because I'm angry at her. But that's a story for a whole nother day.
Vania, I know that Deirdre obviously knows you very well, and so do I. But tell our viewers, how long have you been in the media industry?
And what have you done? Like, you know, like, you know, not everyone knows, like, where you, like, you know, your media journey as such.
Yeah. So right in the beginning, I started in community radio. That is the beautiful or the really great bush radio in Salt River. That's where I started my broadcasting journey. And I moved on to community newspapers, where I worked for the Metro Burger and the Tygerburger, you know, City Vision in that space. I learned a lot there. Also, I learned a lot of what I didn't want to see. I used to come home crying because of how sad the world was for my peers and younger, you know, how hard life was out there. And because I came from such a sheltered background, it was almost more so heart-wrenching to first and foremost see it. And now I don't have the shelter of my parents. They're not taking me to work. I had to experience traveling by train, you know, for the first time alone to Salt River. And that was in a time when Richard Stachy was burnt alive, you know. So like literally in that time, and I would walk past that space, and that the tar on the road was still, you know, all the evidence was still there of that incident. And it was scary, guys. It was scary getting off on that platform and having to walk alone. And yeah, anyway, but that was a journey. I hated coming home, crying myself to sleep because I had covered a story today, for argument's sake, where I had to go and interview parents who have just lost a 13-year-old who had unfortunately committed suicide, throwing herself on the train tracks. And, you know, then you had to delve into, you became not just a journalist, but a social worker, a friend, a sister, everything. And there you in this home, and the little sibling of this teenager who had just passed on is now finding or trying to build a relationship with you. The parents are heartbroken in front of you. The community minister is there. We are praying. Luckily, I come from a background where religion and spirituality is not unfamiliar to me. So, you know, I quite comfortably could be in that moment, but it was still daunting. The inspector, and because you know how in the communities things are dealt with differently, and there is that community pastor that will go around whether he employed himself or he's with a congregation or not. There are those community workers, and thank God for them, and I salute them. Yeah, and too much of that. And then I just decided that as a young journalist, you know, your beat unfortunately is crime, and crime was not something that that the space I could live in at the time. It was way too depressing. And then I moved on to a much easier, shall I say, space, which was magazines. And I found myself at TV Plus magazine, and doing things from production coordination to fashion to writing about soapies and interviewing celebrities, whether it be local or international, and that kind of thing. So it was a much easier and even much more relaxed environment.
Yeah.
From there, I stayed in the magazine space for quite some time, but then also just before I went to magazines, I started at Good Hope FM, and I'm still there 20 years later. I've moved on from one magazine to the next. You remember the wonderful Move magazine? You know, I was there at inception. I remember fondly. There wasn't even an office, you know, we just had the space, and the then editor is Alfinter, and I mean, we literally had to find staff, interview the perfect candidates, you know, to put this magazine together. And I must say, I cut my teeth in that magazine. It opened so many doors for me, and just, you know, catapulted me light years into where I came from, all that shelter, yet now firsthand I'm again seeing different cultures and just how people live and the struggles that they deal with. I mean, we traveled the country with Move magazine, and just again having to just make magic.
Move was prolific in the time. No, there was no magazines necessarily for the Black demographic, and
yes,
Move really, you know, that.
And I would say for that LSM group, because you either had, what was it, Bona magazine, which was like a very low LSM, and then there was like a True Love, which was again a glossy, which was like way above everyone's, you know, fireplace. And then Move came, and just, I mean, it's to be celebrated. Then from Move, from Move Kayed, came about, and oh my word, Kayed needs no introduction.
But in that time, Vania, now being, between all these magazines and everything and the media journey, how do you feel colored females? Were they well represented or misrepresented? Yeah. How did you feel about the female coloreds at that time in the media industry? And also now?
Also given that, Vania, you've had a journey through media.
Yeah.
So just like, give us your perspective on the representation, within the colored ethnic group as well as African ethnic group. Like, what has the representation been over the time that you've, the 20 years that you've been? Like, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be that much different from what you already perceive the media to have been how many years ago, We come from a time, I'm sitting here, I'm very proud to say the landscape has changed. I mean, definitely positive changes have been brought about tenfold, but I think it was forced to change, And us as women of color, we weren't going to back down any longer. We weren't going to be prescribed to as, if you weren't looking like a model and you weren't the right height, skin tone, or whatever it is, then so be it. We are more confident within ourselves, and so now we are stepping forward more and not agter in die koor, is nou voor in die koor, because we can, because we deserve to completely. But sorry, Deirdre.
Solos, also know the solos, also see me backup.
Correct. Ek is nie meer backup dancer nie. Back in the day, I mean, if I think about the representation, there was a pool, a handful, and names like maybe Amy Kleinans. Mm-hmm. And way after her, a Joanne Strauss, with the tokens. If I think of the Black community, it was like the Carol Bowers or the, what is her name? Oh, and now I forget her name. Generations actress.
Ferguson.
Anyway, she was also one of the first women, Black women, to go public by saying that she went under the knife and did her nose. Connie Ferguson.
Yes.
And those were the icons that we almost thought it was the only people of color that could make it to TV or be in a glossy. But that has definitely changed today. I mean, come on. And I mean, yeah.
Change that has happened is like there is a greater focus, and for the lack of a better term, on subcultures as opposed to mainstream culture as we've known it, And that to me has been one of the most beautiful changes to the landscape. And it's like you said earlier on, like we've come forward now. We've come forward in diversity, and we want to be heard, and we want to take our place. And take our space as women of color, and as men of color, men of color.
Yes, absolutely.
We have, stepped forward and, really, really taken our space.
Correct.
And
it's to be celebrated. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be alive in this time and to realize that the opportunities are still in front of us. It's just there to be grabbed by us.
Yeah, and it's always been there. It's just we're finding space, to confidently step forward and say, you know what, I'm taking up space unapologetically.
Yes.
I'm looking at Van and I'm so mesmerized by her beauty. I have to ask, growing up, I'm looking at you and I see your sleek hair and Jay's bio, but I can't find it. What were you perceived as, white or colored? What were you seen as?
I won't think that I wasn't seen as colored. My mom is very fair-skinned, and so too her siblings, and they could very easily pass as so-called white or white people with blonde hair and colored eyes and the whole shebang. And most of my family, or a lot of us, have similar traits, you know, long hair, the fair skin, whatever. It was difficult though at times